and they cut poverty and extreme poverty by 2/3, and they were able to do all these other things because they were no longer subject to these kinds of policies that Europe is subjecting itself to. Okay, finally, I want to end a little bit on a note of progress, because I want people to understand that it's not all hopeless. Okay, first of all, even in Europe, the resistance has made a difference. Okay, so because there's so much protest in Greece, for example, this year, well, they had to cancel half of the debt. That was part of that as well. But also, the budget tightening this year is mostly in the form of tax increases. And not spending cuts. That's because of the resistance to this, okay? So even in Europe, where the authorities are really stubborn, you do see the effect of the protests and the resistance to these policies, okay? In the United States, of course, I already mentioned the positive side. We got the central bank, at least, to do the right thing. We got a little bit of stimulus. It's not anywhere near enough, don't worry. I mean, I'm not praising it. I'm saying that this is what we got. And we got one other thing that people may not have heard about, but I think it's actually very important, not just because we worked on it, but we have a program of work sharing in the United States that is at the state level in 25 states, where the state governments will provide money to employers who want to keep people on the job instead of instead of laying them off. They can use unemployment funds for that purpose. And now the federal government finally passed legislation this year to give money to the states to do that. And there's no limit right now in the law on how much money that would be. So it's up to the states now to actually do that. And so that is significant, because in Germany, they managed to keep unemployment down to 5.5%. It's now about 5.5%, much lower than it was before the world recession, by doing exactly that, by paying and subsidizing employers to keep people on the job. So that's another form of progress. So I want to end there because I just want to emphasize that in spite of these enormous obstacles, the bad policies, the public misunderstanding, the stubbornness, and the inflation monster, there's still a lot can be done. And if people organize and fight for these things, we will see more of these positive changes in the future. Thank you.
Two questions in regard to Europe. When you say they want to keep the situation as it is, I mean, Europe isn't monolithic, and Germany has a particular interest in this, particularly after it cost them so much after the unification of Germany to absorb the East, and now they're feeling put upon that they are going to be paying disproportionately for Greece, and of course, if it should happen in Portugal, there as well. So that's one thing maybe you could address. The other thing is, if you take a small country like Greece or Portugal, would they be better off breaking away from the currency, the common currency, and aside from maybe actually collecting taxes the way they didn't do before, and maybe limit the number of public employment vis-a-vis private employment, could they make an economic go of it outside of the community?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. As I was throwing too much data at people, and I went too fast, and so I didn't want to give the whole Greek that argument of what Greece should do. You know, we're actually next week we'll put up the PowerPoint and the talk that I did at Harvard a few weeks ago on this subject. It was a panel discussion and a little bit of debate, because I argued that, yeah, not that they should just do it because, you know, it's a big decision to make, but that any responsible government would have to consider leaving the euro under their situation. And yes, I do think, my own opinion is that, you know, given the experience of Argentina, it's a very similar situation. that they would do better. And a lot of people don't know that because they don't know the story of Argentina. There's a lot of myths about that. Like if you listen to the media, you would think that Argentina recovered because of an export, commodity boom, they say it is. They had agricultural exports, soybeans, and prices were rising. And what is poor Greece going to do? And they don't export that much anyway. And that's what you hear, so Greece can't do what Argentina did. Well, first of all, Greece's exports are about twice the level of Argentina's when they did that, okay, as a percent of their economy. They have twice as much, all right? That's number one. Number two, it wasn't an export-led boom at all in Argentina. Exports contributed very little to the entire growth of the 63% growth you had in the 6 years following the devaluation. It was mainly, they grew on the basis of domestic consumption and investment because they freed themselves from the pro-cyclical macroeconomic policies that Greece is following. So, yeah, I think they really, it's a very tough thing. I know, that's why I don't say, you should just do this, because, and it's kind of like when you make a bad investment, you've lost 25%, you lost 50, you've lost 75. When do you get out? You figure the more you've lost, the more likely it is, well, obviously it is less likely because it can't go below zero. So in Greece, the government is always thinking that, okay, look at how much we've lost, 16% of GDP already. If you compare that to the financial crisis of the last century, that's a big one. That's one of the biggest, okay? Maybe it'll turn around. And you also have this problem of politics, that if you're the government and you do what the European authorities tell you and things go to hell, you only get some of the blame because, you could say you were forced. Whereas if you decide to send them to hell and do what the Kirchners did, or the government even before them in Argentina, that took a lot of guts, because then if things go wrong, you get all the blame. So that's part of the story too. Now on the other question about Germany and the various interests, it's true. I mean, the smaller, Greece should get out from their own interest, and the Europeans want to keep them in. They want to, because look, imagine Greece gets out and it does unfold, which I think is the most likely scenario, like in Argentina. Think of what everyone else is going to think. Spain, 24% unemployment. Why should we put up with this for another 10 years, or whatever it's going to be? And so that could be, I think that's one of the things that, maybe they should have put the exit monster in that little video. Maybe that's what the ECB is really afraid of. So yeah, you have different national interests, but right now, those don't really matter so much because you don't have a single government in the peripheral countries that has the kind of courage that the Argentine government had back in 2001, 2002, and 2003 even, when they had to default to the IMF and force them to back down as well.
I wanted you to talk about Jim Kim and your World Bank stance and unravel that a little bit, because I know that you've been positive about that, but it seems to me the World Bank is still subject to politicization. And my favorite example is when $500 million was given to Ethiopia, and then the U.S. Used them to attack Somalia. So there are a lot of things that go on that Kim won't have much power to change. And also, could you go over some of that?
Yeah, I can do a little bit. I'm going to do that actually here. I thought I could escape the television, but there's actually a studio at WILL. So Al Jazeera English is